I feel like nobody who belongs to nowhere. There is something painful about growing up in a place where you were born and not having citizenship. Our lives have been ruined and our histories have been spoiled. I fly through this life with nowhere to land. What crime did I commit? We are between the earth and the sky. We want to ask the world, where is our place? These are not the words of just one man. These are actually the words of men, women, and children all over the world. Different histories, different languages, different religions, and what binds them together to create this one voice, this one common identity. It's that they have all been subjected to and have also endured one of the most radical, politically sensitive injustices in the world today. Imagine not having a birth certificate or a passport or an ID card. Imagine then not being able to access health care or go to school or get a job. Imagine not being a citizen of any country in the world today. I'm a documentary photographer, and I've spent the last 10 years photographing and documenting their stories. And so today, I want to introduce you to the world's 10 million stateless people. At the end of 2005, I made a decision to pack up and temporarily relocate to Asia, where I'd spend 1 year creating a photo essay about stateless people in Asia. And on the flight from Los Angeles to Bangkok, I kept thinking about a question a group of human rights lawyers had asked me. They said, how is it possible to capture something so intangible like statelessness and citizenship through a photograph? I landed in Asia. I had my Nikon, my Leica, a bag filled with rolls of black and white film, a short list of stateless communities and places where I wanted to visit. In Bangladesh, I met 60-year-old Abdu, who was one of 200,000 people from the Urdu-speaking community who had already been stateless for 30 years. Abdu showed me a picture that was taken of him at the age of 19, and he said that every day since that photograph had been taken were lost days of his life. In Nepal, I met Bohe, who was one at the time of several million people living in the Trai area along the border with India who were stateless, many of them from the Dalit community. Denied citizenship, landless, and unable to travel abroad to work as a foreign migrant laborer because he couldn't possess a passport, Bohe and his family lived a hand-to-mouth existence. And then there was Fatima, who was one of several 100,000 people from the stateless Rohingya community who shared with me horrific stories of human rights abuses that they had endured in their homeland of Burma, such as forced labor, religious persecution, and even the denial of the right to get married. During that first year, I kept asking myself the question, how is this possible and why don't people know about it? And I realized that actually Asia was just the starting point for me, that there was so much more to be done. So I made the decision to essentially embed myself into this issue and commit myself to photographing and documenting the lives of stateless people all over the world. A person can become stateless for any number of different reasons. Most people that I met, statelessness was rooted in discrimination and intolerance. Stateless people have a deep connection to the places where they live. Most stateless people are not refugees. They've never left the country of their birth. The problem is not that they don't have a home. It's at the places that they do call home. The state, the government, people in power have actually said, you don't belong here, and have rejected them. And the weapon that has been used to reject them is the arbitrary denial of citizenship, this fundamental thing that actually legally connects all of us as individuals to a state, to any number of rights, and in essence, to the rest of the world. What a Rohingya man told me from Burma, he said, because we don't have citizenship, we are like a fish out of water, flapping and unable to breathe. If we were given citizenship, we would be like that fish that you catch and then throw back in the water where he belongs. We're still out of water. And when a fish is out of water, it suffocates. We've been out of water for such a long time now, and we're suffocating. We're suffocating to death. 1 year turned into 2, then to 3, then to 6. I expanded my work in Asia to Sri Lanka, and then to Kenya and the Ivory Coast in Africa, to Kuwait, Lebanon, and Iraq in the Middle East, to the Dominican Republic, and then to Serbia, Italy, Malta, Holland, Poland, and Ukraine. The project took on a global proportion. In most cases, statelessness doesn't take on the form of killing, murder, or violence. It actually is a silent form of exclusion that evades the headlines. Statelessness is a taboo subject that governments don't want to discuss, primarily because it's discriminatory and intolerant policies by governments themselves that actually make people stateless to begin with. So what does it look like? What does it look like when you're born, denied a birth certificate, and then shut out from being able to attend even a primary level government school? Well, it looks like these children in Malaysia. Of the 10 million people who are stateless in the world today, 3 million are children. What does a mother's love look like for her stateless daughter, even though as a woman, she's been unable to pass on her citizenship to her children because of discriminatory laws? Well, it looks like Amal and her little daughter, Rama, in Lebanon. Today, 27 countries in the world have nationality laws that actually discriminate against women and do not allow them to pass on their citizenship to their children. What does it look like when stateless youth actually peacefully protest for their right to citizenship and equality in the country of their birth? Well, it looked like this for several thousand stateless youth from the Bedouin community in Kuwait. And what does it look like when your government and your neighbors actually refuse to accept that your community even exists and does everything that it possibly can to make sure that your life becomes so miserable you pay human traffickers to then leave? Well, it looks like this for some 800,000 people from the stateless Rohingya community in Burma today. In 2014, I started what I thought was going to be the last chapter of my project, Europe, where there's roughly 600,000 people stateless in Europe today. I was in Holland, and I was introduced to this 33-year-old man. We met in Amsterdam, had a coffee, and we went to Vondel Park to talk. We found a bench in a quiet area of the park. I had my microphone and my recorder, and he started to share his story with me. He was born in Syria. He had never possessed a document. Both of his parents had passed away when he was incredibly young, and he had been stateless for his entire life. He said that at the age of 14, he embarked on a journey where he would spend the next 10 years migrating across Europe with one goal in mind, and that was to make it to the UK, where he would apply for asylum. He actually hid underneath the axle of a truck on the ferry crossing from France, only to arrive here in the UK to have his asylum claims rejected. He eventually made his way to Holland, where all of his attempts to secure his status were denied because Holland, like most countries in Europe, doesn't even have a procedure put in place to determine who a stateless person is. I remember he told me that during those years of traveling, he learned 6 different languages. Language for him was not just about surviving, but it was also about security. It made him invisible. Because if he ran into the wrong person on the street and didn't speak Turkish, Hungarian, German, French, Dutch, or English, it'd be enough for that person to actually question why he was there to begin with, and could lead to them asking him for a document that he knew he would never be able to provide. I remember as we were sitting on the bench talking, this family passed by on the path in front of us. A mother was pushing a baby stroller. The father slowly pedaled by on a bicycle. And then their young son approached, riding this tiny bicycle with training wheels on the back. And I remember the expression on that boy's face was of pure joy and freedom. And I sat there and I held my microphone, and this man continued to tell me these stories about isolation and loneliness and dreams that would never be fulfilled. And at that moment, I looked at the young boy, and everything was perfect in his life, and just as it should be. He embodied a future filled with possibilities that in so many ways comes simply from having the protection and the security of having a place to call home. I actually remember the way that the wheels on the boy's bicycle sounded as they crunched over the dirt pathway in front of us. His life was perfect. And freedom for him was, like for most of us, was effortless, like inhaling and exhaling. And I remember at that moment, I had this deep, rumbling sense of frustration that was then followed by this split second of anger. Because I thought of that 14-year-old boy who was now a man and all the years that he had lost just simply trying to find a place to call home. And the sheer injustice of having been rejected from the world from actually having one. Later, I packed up my microphone and my recorder, and he turned to me and he said, "Listen, you've met stateless people all over the world. What are their lives like?" So I shared with him some of the stories of the people I'd met and the communities I'd been to, and he listened to my words as closely as I had to his earlier. I understood that even though I'd met all these people around the world, that he had a deeper understanding of their lives than I ever could or ever would. His reaction to my stories was this mixture of comfort and sadness. Comfort in actually knowing that there were people out there that knew what it was like, what he was going through, but also sadness in knowing that there were all these millions of people out there that were living in a world that's so interconnected and intertwined, yet were completely and totally banished from it. That conversation I had in the park that day had a profound impact on me, both personally and professionally. Because I realized that what I set out to do back in 2005 was not just about photographing and documenting stateless communities and people around the world. It was actually about using photography to bring all these people that I would photograph together, to create this portrait of a global community that most people in the world had no idea existed, to make this invisible community visible, and to see that this dark element of the human condition that they existed in actually became tangible for as many people as possible. Themes that rest at the heart of statelessness, like racism, discrimination, exclusion, intolerance, they have no borders. But the lives of stateless people are filled with invisible borders that most of us could never comprehend. And it's those invisible borders that actually make stateless people feel invisible themselves. Like Hannah Arendt said, she said, "It seems that a man who is nothing but a man has lost the very qualities which make it possible for others to treat him as a fellow man." I often thought, so what is it all for when there's so little change? Over the past 9 years, I've made 12 trips to Burma and Bangladesh to document the Rohingya community from Burma. Yet today, it's been 2 years since a Rohingya child has actually been permitted to go to school. And also today, 150,000 people from the Rohingya community are forced to live in modern-day concentration camps under the nose of the international community when human rights activists and experts say a slow-burning genocide is happening right now. But in spite of so little change, I feel this deep responsibility to continue to share these stories with people. Because photography is a language, and it's a language that needs to be included in discussions, because it's far too easy for the voices and the stories of the dispossessed and the unwanted to actually just become lost. Does highlighting prejudice actually make us think about tolerance? Does showing exclusion make us think about acceptance and belonging? Does sharing the pain and suffering of others actually ultimately make us think about their resilience and their courage? Well, I hope it does. And I hope that it inspires all of us to have a stronger sense of urgency to actually right something that is so fundamentally wrong. Photography amplifies. What does statelessness look like today? Well, this is what statelessness and stateless people look like today. For the past 9 years, I've had the privilege of meeting some of the most resilient, courageous, determined people who want nothing more than to live their lives, contribute, and be recognized in the places they call home. An elder from the Nubian community in Kenya shared with me something years ago that I think is so appropriate for us here today. And he said that a community becomes confident when it is recognized by other communities. Thank you.